So, this is Darren from SimNation again, with SimNation College Football League, which is a draft day sports college football 21 title. I promised many of you that I would do this video around game planning and how do you develop a winning team. And I apologize for not doing this sooner. A lot of things going on, work being a big one. Um, so I'm going to spend about 15-20 minutes and just kind of talk a little bit about what is success, right? Um, and I think a couple things to kind of bake into the back of your mind as I talk about how to develop a winning program and a winning game plan, right? First of all, is it all starts with you understanding the players you have, what they're good at, what they're not good at, and the opponents you have, and what they're good at and what they're good at and what they're not, right? Um, and you'll hear me a lot of times talk about a system. So there's the system you have, the system you want to have, and the system that you don't want to have, right? So the system you have is largely when you first take over a program, you're not going to probably run the system that you really want to. So kind of if you come in and your thing is you're an option system and you really want to do it, but you don't have running backs who can run, a quarterback who can run, a line that can run block, you're not going to be running the option. Or you can, it's just you're going to lose. And if you're okay with that, you're okay with that. Um, but if you come in and you have that circumstance where you have a quarterback who has a decent arm, you have speedy wide receivers, and you have a running back, what you would do is build a system that actually accounts for what you currently have while you're recruiting for what you want to be. So generally speaking, I think I mentioned this once before a long time ago that in general, it takes about 2 or 3 recruiting cycles for you to truly get where you want to be. Sometimes you can do it in a season, sometimes maybe two. Maybe you have the right underlying footprint. So those who traditionally do it fast, or they're not choosing teams that they love, or maybe they are and they got lucky that that team already has kind of that system in place, right? Um, but large times, there are people who look at the teams, they think about what it is that they want to run system wide, and they choose, let the team that best fits their system be the team that they choose. So if you're not one of those people, it's okay to lose for 2 or 3 seasons. As you're getting better, or you're recruiting the right players, you're figuring out what works and what doesn't, and you're modifying your system to continue to get better. So that's the second thing is you need to analyze what's working and what's not. A lot of coaches get into this game and they just expect to win. It's not that simple. Maybe in the 2018, 2019, and maybe even 2020 versions, you could do that because you knew that if you ran counter left or sweep left, you were going to be able to run for 6 yards of carry. If you did wide receiver fly, it was going to get you about 20, and you'd complete maybe 60% of your passes, right? Especially if you had a speedy wide receiver and a quarterback with an arm. 2021 version's not like that. It actually penalizes you if you try to play the same playbook over and over again, and if you try to do things that really don't fit. So, the other thing is in a human league where you have a lot of humans, they do crazy stuff. They're not doing what the CPU does. So you need to look and see what they're doing, and then you need to build your game plan around what they are doing and what puts you in the best position to win. I think the other thing is the key tenet here is just have fun. This game can really drive you insane. I kind of equate sometimes this game to like Escape from Tarkov, right? Escape from Tarkov is a constant ball puncher. Every time you think you get good at it, you realize you're not. So continue to look and see what's working and what's not, but at the end of the day, just try to have fun. Play your game. Don't play just for the solid wins or things like that. If that matters to you, then you need to pick a program that it has the best chance of winning. And largely, you need to pick a program that fits the system that you want to run, or you need to copy a system that you think is working at another coach. So I a lot of times have a lot of people who copy me. I'm fine with it. In fact, I've given my playbook to a bunch of people. And then they come back to me the next season and say, Darren, it's not working. And it's like, well, of course it's not working. You don't have the players to run my system. Players. So I work generally in the IT field, right? And we have a term, people process tools. People, easy. That's your recruits. That's your players. The process is your strategy and your um, methodology. Tools kind of is more along the lines of your playbook. So I'll talk about that today. And I'm going to use Washington State. Everyone keeps asking me to use Maryland. It's not fair. Maryland is a 90 prestige team. They have everything. They are literally racked and stacked with 5 stars. Um, I joke around. I can bully people with Maryland. Well, I don't even need to game plan the way I would, except for maybe 4 or 5 games a year while I'm playing against a quality team or a quality coach. Well, I need to take it seriously. Most of the time, I don't. I just simply modify a few things here or there based on what I see, and then I let them go off. Washington State, I have to game plan every single game because Washington State just isn't that good. And as a result, and it's a team I took because I've always liked the Cougars. I think Washington State's cool, and I would go back to the Leach years and just think about how great that they were during that period and even before then. So I go back to like seeing Drew Bledsoe play there and things like that. So, but again, not very good. They had largely what I wanted in a system. Well, I wanted to be able to throw the ball and I wanted to be able to run the ball. I wanted a really balanced attack. Maryland, of course, is not balanced. They run the ball. So I chose them for a reason. I have them up in front of me, and I'm going to kind of talk about how to game plan. So this is a data game, right? Statistics. If you're not looking at the data to figure out what your opponents are doing, you're not going to be successful. Again, you may luck into getting a 90 prestige program where maybe it doesn't matter, but you're going to find yourself losing to those coaches that do actually pay attention and build game plans against the data. There really is no meta in 2021. You may luck into it and find something that works for you and it'll work against most offenses, but it's not going to work against all. It's the same thing with defense, right? So if you're thinking and you're asking me what is the meta, don't approach that way. This isn't a first-person shooter where if you use an M4 with the following attachments and slots, you're going to have the best success because the gun is going to shoot straight almost every single time. It doesn't work that way in this game. So there really isn't a meta. The meta is defined by you, the players, and the system. So I'm going to kind of talk about the Arizona game. So go back 2 weeks. I just beaten Arizona State, which was Gary. I don't think Gary was actually there. I think he was on vacation. And I now have a big game against Arizona. If you notice, I'd lost 3 straight. So you're like, okay, you're showing me a team that's not doing well. Well, here's the thing. They're a 55 prestige team. These teams are all well above the prestige. But I just lost 3 games, mostly because my starting quarterback was out, injured. My starting tailback was out, injured. I had a starting wide receiver out, injured. And generally, my defense was just banged up pretty bad. I don't have a good second quarterback. And I do have a good second running back, which you can see here. This is Boyce. But when the offense is humming, in what makes Washington State undefeatable is actually the Boyce-Tellers combo. Boyce and Tellers are 2 different styles of running back, and I kind of use them in that kind of tandem, right? So I just beat Arizona State. I just ended my 3-game losing slide, and what I'm now looking at is Arizona. Arizona's a good team. Not that Arizona State wasn't, they are. But I got kind of a lucky bypass because Gary was out on vacation. So when I clicked, first thing I do is I open it up. I see who's injured, who's not. And it looked differently because you would have said Albert Sylvester was still injured. Or I think he was probable, and I decided to play him. So I immediately click on Arizona. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at them. So I traditionally will look at the last game or last two games in loss. So if they've won two and they've lost one, I'm gonna look at those. So I start with Oregon. They lost this game 35-0, and I did that wrong. Apologies. And what I'm doing is I'm clicking on the score, and I'm kind of seeing this. So Arizona's on the left, Oregon's on the right. Um, okay, the quarterback had INT problems. This McKinney kid is pretty good. He ran for 98. So did Hernandez for 61. I'm looking at the rushing, 41 for 216, so they like to run the ball. Now, the most crucial thing for me is to go to play analysis. So what I'm looking for here is tendencies. So what I see here immediately, and I'm storing this in the back of my mind, I may actually put this on a spreadsheet if I want to, because then I can just copy it and then paste it into a spreadsheet. On first down, they tend to run the ball more than pass, so roughly about 55%. Same thing on second down, they tend to run the ball more than pass. On third down, they pass more than run. I need to take this with a grain of salt because what it may be is that they are running the ball and finding themselves they have a long or 5 yards or more on third down, so they're going to pass the ball. But that's not really the case here because if you look at this run, 20 rushes, 6.4, 16, 3.8. So they're largely looking at third and ones most of the time. So, okay, so that gives me an idea. I'm jotting that down on a piece of paper to say what I think the percentages are, and I'll show you how that maps back to strategy. Now, bear in mind, they lost 35-0, right? I'm also looking at what were they successful with and what were they successful against. So counter left, 3-4 defense, 7 yards. Counter right, 5-2 defense, they weren't successful. So inside, they're not doing well against the 3-4. Inside, they're doing well against the 5-2. That maybe Oregon doesn't have good defensive tackle. I don't know that, but I'm looking at this stuff and I'm doing some tallies and thinking about what's working, what's not. Then I look at Oregon to see what Oregon's successful. So what I notice immediately is that Arizona's running mostly a 3-4 with some 4-3. So probably running 3-4 on passing downs, 4-3 on rushing downs. And immediately what I notice is dive right. They seem to have a problem with dive right, so I'm cataloging that. I'm potentially going to use that in my playbook. The fly, they're having a problem with that. So when I look at the roster, they may not have speed in our cornerbacks. They may not have speed in the linebackers, and I'm going to want to exploit that. So I've started to look here and see what worked, what didn't. And I also see that they ran the ball predominantly against Arizona, which makes sense. They won 35-0. Now I want to look at the last game, which is UCLA. Arizona won it, so Arizona is on the right, UCLA is on the left, okay? So, again, looking at the same things, right? Arizona ran the ball more on first down than they passed, same thing. And this time around, they actually ran, which means they weren't in long scenarios, right? And then I'm looking to see what they were successful against. So, high formation, 3-4, they're good at counter left. 4-3, not so good. 3-4, again, it looks like that they do very good running the ball with counters against the 3-4, which would make sense, right? When you do a counter, a 3-4 only has a nose tackle and two defensive ends. You're expecting your linebackers to fill the gaps. So if you have good inside linebackers, you may not worry about that. But if you don't, you may want to think about that when you game plan, that you may not want to run the 3-4 on running downs against Arizona. And I didn't. I was like, on running downs, I need to figure out when I think they're running, so it looks like first and second down predominantly, although second is kind of a mix. And what I'm going to try to do is on running downs, I'm going to try to push myself into a 4-3 because it looks like trying to find a different one. 3-3-5 looks like it's actually decent too, which is good because Washington State runs a 3-3-5 as one of its bases. So again, 4-3, no success. So I want to run a 4-3 on those downs or 3-3-5. Passing downs, I'm doing the same thing. I'm looking. What were they good? What weren't they good at? And what I'm noticing is, largely speaking, they did not do as good against the 3-4 as they did things. So I may run a 3-4 in my passing thing, although honestly in this game I ran a 3-3-5. So I've got an idea now, right, of who they are, what they are. Now, generally, when I have the time, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go back to them, and I'm going to click on the roster. And what I'm looking for here is I'm looking for matchups. I can't see their depth chart, so I don't know how they line up their depth chart. I can get an idea of it based on stats, and who's playing and who's not. So when I look at, I'm gonna look at the running backs because I think I remember the two guys with the running backs. So if I look at this, they are speed. So running backs have good speed. I'm going to have to account for that. Wide receivers, let's look at that. They've got good speed. So generally the offense is pretty well stacked. Now cornerbacks is what I'm looking at because I like to throw the ball. They have one guy who has good speed. I need to look back and see if he started. And they've got a couple people with speed, which means the nickel probably isn't as fast. At the linebacker, they really don't have speed. So I need to account for that. So tight ends and running backs, I need to think about that. On the ends, they've got decent speed, nothing great. Strength, it's okay. Defensive tackle, let's look here. Strength, they got strong defensive tackles, decent speed, and okay, so probably don't want to run the ball inside very often because they look like that they're pretty strong now. Want to look at their guards, want to see what they're good at, start developing a thought process. I'll go back and look and see who actually was playing and who had pancakes and so forth. But what I'm noticing is the guards are decently fast. They're not great. They've got strength. So I got to account for that. I'm probably not going to bull rush them with Washington State off the tackles. So I'll need to think about that. And then when I look at this is, again, I'm looking at what they have. And their tackles are not strong. They're not very agile. They're okay on the speed. And they're pretty decent at pass blocking. And they have decent skills. And then looking at the center, same thing. So now I'm ready to go back to my team, right? And I have an idea of what I want to do here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my depth chart. And again, bear in mind that this is a few weeks after some of the stuff that has happened with Washington State, where I now have a lot more people who are healthy than were during that period. So I jumped ahead here. There we go. So now what I'm thinking is this. I need to look at what I do well. So Sylvester was probable. If you notice him, he's got an arm, he's very accurate, he's very intelligent, and these are great traits for a sophomore. It's one of the reasons why I chose this, right? Is he's not going to run the ball. Hinson, if I was going to run the ball, would be the guy I would choose. Again, don't like his hands, but this dude is fast. He's not going to win games with his accuracy. He's got a decent arm and he's intelligent. And I thought about essentially running plays where Hinson ran the ball, but when I knew I had Sylvester, he was going to be my starting, I immediately thought, okay, medium passing game, long passing game. I'm going to put some flies in there. I'm going to put some deep outs and things like that inside there. And I'm going to play to that because I have a quarterback who has the arm strength to do it. With the running back, again, if you notice, I only have three. I didn't have a good recruiting cycle. None of them are fast. So, but they are agile and they're strong. So, Washington State runs a lot from the inside. So you see a lot of counters, a lot of dives, a lot of off tackles. I don't tend to run the ball outside because I don't have the crew to do it. So you're going to see me trying to stay in between the guards or the guards and the tackles. I'm not going to try to bust it out constantly. They do have the ability to do it, but it's not going to produce a lot of success. Also, the other thing to watch is Boyce is a good all-purpose back. Tellez is not. Tellez is my leading rusher. And he gets by with a lot of this agility, right? Again, inside agility matters, outside speed matters. Speed matters on sending them up the field if you're a running back in the passing game. Agility matters when it's short passing. So that kind of gives me a good idea of what I should be doing now. When I look at my offensive line, what you immediately notice is Clark has some decent skills, but he's slow, so he's never going to see the field. Apple has good speed. He's a good pass blocker. I'm going to put him in positions where I'm going to pass. He's strong too. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at these things and I'm thinking, okay, passing attack. Rushing game, it's okay. None of these guys are going to really be the same on the same down. So my guards are good at the passing game. My tackles are largely good at the passing game as well. So I'm going to try to throw the ball as much as I can. Now, when Sylvester got hurt, I started running the ball. The reason for it is I didn't have a quarterback who could run the system anymore. So I changed my system. I think I kept games close because I went to a rushing attack. I changed up my pacing. Normally, Washington State's aggressive, very fast offense. I changed it to conservative and very slow because I wanted to slow the game down. And we'll talk about that in a moment. When you look at the center again, generally, here's a rule of thumb with offensive linemen. You want their speed to be anywhere from 50 to 70. If it's in the 40s, it's not too bad, but in the case of a tackle, it's not going to work well for you. If you're going to have slow linemen, put them on the interior. Again, pass blocking skill matters more in this version. Run blocking skill matters more in this version. In the past, strength mattered more. But again, you also want to have agility, you want to have strength, and then you want to look at skill. So in this case, again, pass blocking is my best strength. I have a couple guys who can do okay in the run blocking in the center. And from there, from a cornerback, if you're playing zone, agility matters. If you're playing coverage, speed matters. You want people to have good hands. Tackling's not as important. Skill is. Intelligence matters too. But generally, if you're going to play balanced, you should have both agility and speed. And again, if you have corners who have great agility, maybe not so fast, you should be playing zone. Linebacker, same thing. And for me, linebacker is a case where I put my fastest linebackers on the outside. I put my most agile linebackers on the inside with the best tackling skills and the best intelligence. So Banks tends to play inside for me because he's okay speed-wise. He's got really decent tackling, but he's smart. And he has not so good agility, but Heath has good agility. He's slow as molasses. But I could put him on the inside, and he'd probably do pretty well for me, though. Tackle, we talked about this before. Strength matters. Speed is good to have. I would say it's a differentiator. Tackling is okay, but it's really strength, agility, speed. In defensive end, it's really speed and agility. Strength does matter. Here's the thing. If you have a guy who has less than, say, 60 strength, he better have really good speed, because if he doesn't, he's just not going to do much. The tackles are going to maul him. So kind of looking at this, I've got an idea of what I'm good at. I have an arm quarterback who has great arm strength. I have running backs who are great between the tackles. I have an offensive line that is pretty much built for a passing attack, much more than a rushing attack. But they have strength and they have agility, so I can really kind of go with a counter off tackle dive approach to running, right? Wide receivers, I've got some speed. I don't have a lot of it. So I'm not going to be throwing the ball long, even though I have the quarterback that has the arm. I may be able to get away with outs. But generally speaking, they're not very fast. So I'm going to want to keep the ball short. I'm probably going to want to use the running backs more in this offense. When I look at my tight end, I got a decent tight end who's got decent speed. He's got bad hands though. Warr's actually decent, but again, he's slow. So all this stuff is telling me that me throwing the ball long is just not a good idea, even though I have the quarterback who can do it. Now, recruiting-wise, what I am doing is I'm recruiting for speed. Because in the wide receivers and the tight end, because I want to gradually move to where I can open up the offense even more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go strategy. We'll start with the second screen first and then go to the first. So I'm going to go to game planning. I have Sylvester back. I'm going to be aggressive, which means that I'm going to call more high risk, high return plays. I'm focusing on the run. And again, this doesn't matter because I use custom playbooks. This matters more if you're using your coach. Tempo, I'm going normal. Sylvester just got back. I don't want to get him hurt again. Passing preference, I would be normally create a new game plan. Hell, it's just a bug. We'll go short. Passing target, I'm gonna go balanced because I don't want to pick on one area, but if I had a good arm, I'd go outside. If my tight ends are fast or the strongest, I would throw the tight ends, running backs. Over the middle is just not a good idea most of the time because you're going to get a lot of INTs. But, it works especially if you have quick wide receivers. Running backs, again, you throw at them a lot if they're the strongest part of it. And again, play to the matchup of your opponent. So we looked at our opponent. We saw what they were good at and what they weren't. What I noticed about Arizona is they have decent speed at the corner. The linebackers are not very fast at all. They don't have good coverage skills. Their interior line is pretty tough. The exterior line, not as tough. And then the free safety and the strong safety, not very good in coverage. So what I'm thinking immediately is I'm going to go balanced because I want the tight ends and the running backs. I really wish they would allow me to choose just two. And if they did, I would choose tight ends and running back. But I'm going to go balanced. Primary wide receiver, this is back to matchups. My advice to you is when you look at your depth chart, don't make it static. Move your best people around to create matchup problems. So generally speaking, CPU's in love with matching quarterbacks to wide receivers. What that means is quarterback 1 matches to wide receiver 1, quarterback 2 matches to wide receiver 2, so on and so forth. Not a good idea, right? Because you don't want to lock that in, because if you lock that in, someone like me is going to go, okay, quarterback 1's covering wide receiver 1. I'm just not going to throw the ball at wide receiver 1 by default. I'm going to focus on wide receiver 3 because I know the third worst cornerback is going to be there. Now, if I'm defensive planning, I'm thinking that maybe you're thinking that, and then I'm doing that where I'm putting my best cornerback in the nickel slot, and suddenly you find you're running into my best player. But generally, leave it unchecked. Just not a good idea. And we'll talk about defense in a minute. But David Feliciano is my best player. I'm going to target him. We talked about Boyce. Boyce is actually the better all-around back as opposed to Tellez, who of course is injured. But Tellez is my best running back. He's not my best all-purpose back. Boyce is. So I have Boyce for third down. My running focus, I'm balanced right now. At that game, I was actually Like, I don't want to go inside, I want to go outside. So I made it outside. Even though I don't have the speed, I have a better chance of my tackles against our defensive end than I do with my guards against our defensive tackles in the interior line backers. I have the outside linebackers aren't anything for me to worry about. The defensive end was nothing for me to worry about. So what I did was I figured that's my best matchup, and I went outside. Again, with this, choose what they're good at. I'm doing mixed because, again, I intend to throw the ball to my running backs, but I'm not going to just throw the ball to them. So I want them to block and do other things. Same thing with the tight end. Um, Washington State is a blitzing team, so I'm very aggressive in attitude on my defense. I believed at that time this was actually set to run. It's set now for my next game where I believe it's going to be a passing attack. Again, I have decent people to pull off a man coverage. Normally I leave this mixed, but again, if you have agile but no speed, go zone. Unless, of course, you look at their past matchups and you notice that they're just chewing up the zones. Coverage, again, I'm building for a passing attack, so I'm saying I want you to pass rush and I want the linebackers in coverage. If it was a run first team, I would say run support. If it's a balanced team, whichever one is the better of the two at the pass rush is what I'm going to set it as. So if I have great defensive ends, my linebackers are better in coverage, I'm going to make that pass rush. The better one run support, I'll do pass rush and then run support. And then if my defensive line is actually better on run support, I will flip it that way. Player radio is important. Figure out who is the player who has the best leadership. You can see that under personality traits, who has the highest intelligence, and that is typically who you want to be the player radio. Traditionally, look at safeties and look at linebackers. People on the line are not good. Cornerbacks typically are not good, mostly because most cornerbacks are idiots. And then we talked about this. Don't really do this because if you do it, a human opponent's going to largely beat you up. The CPU probably won't. But if you're doing this against another human, they probably have figured out your tendency, and they are now saying, okay, David Feliciano is my best wide receiver. I'm not going to put him in the wide receiver 1 or 2 slot. I'm going to put him at 3. I may even put him at tight end. And then I'm going to start throwing the ball completely at him. And that'll be important when we talk about playbook. Man coverage, again, I run balanced. I would say generally just leave it on balanced or never. Target player, again, if you look at this and you see that really everything goes through Godwin, and this is my next opponent, then you would set that for wide receiver Alfonso Godwin. If they have more than one player who does things for them, don't set it. I'll use the case of Louisiana Monroe, which is Skelter. He has 2 or 3 phenomenal running backs. He uses multiple running backs, or the game forces him to. So traditionally, I'm not going to target his best running back, because what I'll do is I'll shut that person down. Maybe they only get 20 carries for like 70 yards, but that other guy gets 20 carries and he's ran for 140, 200 yards. And at the end of the day, I get slayed by the second running back. So only set target player if you know for a fact, or you can see that they are actually really focusing on one player. Winning and losing, I don't ever set that. It's one of the reasons why I have lopsided wins, and I probably should think about that at some point. But so this is kind of this, and this is a nice thing to look here, because you can see that they tend to throw the ball, score off passing as opposed to rushing. They get a decent amount of sacks. Their interceptions are low. And this is Washington, by the way. So now I go to play calling, and here you can choose the different offenses. I run custom books, So I'm not running the new coach. If you just take over a team, use the coach's playbooks initially. Or if you don't want to deal with it, just use the coach's playbook. Um, Run, pass, wait. We talked about that because what we saw in the game planning before was when you look at how Arizona did, they didn't do as good against the run as the pass, and teams that ran on first down more than pass did better. So I'm gonna run on first down more than I'm gonna pass. And what I determined is 45 is probably the right thing. And again, this gets back to looking at their tendencies. Is if on first down it looks like that they are having high success against the run, it's probably because they're targeting the run. So what that probably means is you should pass the ball. So figure out what is good percentage for you with what you want to do and what your strength is. For instance, if you're not good at throwing the ball, you setting the pass at 100 is not going to help you because you suck at throwing the ball. But maybe setting it at 65 is not bad, or 55, because you will pass the ball more, and maybe that's successful, especially if you're playing to your success like short, medium, long passing game, wide receivers, tight ends, running backs, whatever that is, right? And then so on and so forth. And again, different people do different things. There's some coaches I know who have a different playbook for every down. And there's nothing wrong with that. That actually is an approach, and there are some coaches that make it work very well. I don't tend to do that because I tend to like to play the same playbook. Now, if I were to show you Maryland actually does do that. Well, on first and 10, second and short, I may have the same playbook, but for first and short, third and short, I have a different playbook that I run. And I do that because I've noticed it's successful, and I've also seen what the opponent's good at, and I'm changing up my plays to focus on what they are good at or what their target. I'm sorry, what I'm good at and what they're not good at and what they're targeting. Same thing, and this is important. When we looked at the last games that Arizona had, we noticed that they were doing a lot of runs on first and 10. So I would actually change this to runs. I'm not going to blitz as heavily because blitzing in the running game in this game is just not a good idea. And I'm going to switch it over to 35. Really, anywhere from 20 to 40 is typically good for a run. Anywhere from 75 to 100 is good for the pass. And again, figure out what works for you. This works for me. And second down, I noticed that they were doing a lot of it. And then third down, I noticed, and then we noticed that they were scoring a lot off of the pass. So I'm going to change that to 75 and notice that they were doing runs. So I've just changed my base defense based on what they actually do to give me the best chance of success. Now, here's another thing is a lot of coaches don't do the play analysis. You really should export it to CSV because what it's going to show you is what you're doing well with, right? Now, inside the playbook, it shows you the aggregate average, but it doesn't show you the average against different defenses. So if you notice like you're playing Arizona and they run a 3-4 defense, what I'm immediately going to notice is getting relatively good success with off tackle left against a 3-4 defense, but I'm getting better success with let's find one off tackle left out of 2 tight ends. So I may run that more actually than I would run out of the eye because the success rate is higher. And off tackle right, doing horrible. I'm not going to run that against the 3-4, especially since they seem to be favoring the 3-4. Now, likewise, if they favor the 4-3, I notice that I'm doing pretty well against that, right? Off tackle right. So I may run that, and again, off tackle left. So 2 tight end jumbo looks like it's doing well against a 4-3 defense, and I'm probably going to build that. And what you can do is, and this is a method that's worked for others, I don't really do it this way, but I've seen people do this, is they label their offensive playbook by the defense that they're going against. So this is my 4-3 offense. This is my 3-4 offense. And what it allows you to say is if you've noticed that they are running 4-3 a lot, then run your 4-3 offense against them. And what you're really saying is I'm focusing anything that looks like it plays well against the 4-3. Caveat. This game 2021 favors you to have more plays in your playbook than just 10. So we set the limit at 10. If you just do 10, the game over time will likely penalize you. So doing 20 is better. Now you'll notice in my playbooks I don't have 20, but it's because I do something different. I look at my playbook, I look at the opponent, I see what's going to work and what's not, and then I play with the percentages. So if I see that my off tackle right is going to work in a 2 tight end jumbo set, but it's not going to work in an I formation, I will minus the I formation, and then I will plus the play that will work. So again, look at this and analyze it, and it'll give you a good idea, and then see what your opponent's running, and then that gives you an idea, and then you have the beginnings of your playbook. Same thing for defense, right? Now you can see what your defense is good against and what they're not good against. If you notice, I play a lot of nickel and dime. It's just a holdover. I play a lot of pass defense with Washington State. So what I can see here quickly is what I'm doing well with, what I'm not doing well with, and then I can change my defensive formation. I'll be honest, with Washington State, I'm a little lazy. I don't change my defensive formation very often. I just play with the percentages. Now, when we get to custom playbook, I'll show you my armor new. So this is kind of what I was talking about. So you see the aggregate, right? It's easy to say, well, 30 times 5.37, man, I'm going to run that until the blue and the moon. Problem is it doesn't tell you the formation. If you run that and you're going against a formation that play doesn't do well against, you're not going to do well in that game. So look and see what is being successful and what's not. So if generally speaking that wide receiver curve flats is not doing well against a 5-2 and the person's running a 5-2, don't run that play at a high percentage. But if it is doing well, then plus that sucker up until what you want it to be. You generally want to make changes here every week. So what I'll notice is, hey, look, my short passing game is working pretty good. I'm gonna kick that up a couple points. This one's okay. It's not great. This one's doing really good. So I'm gonna kick that bad boy up too. And what you're noticing is I'm playing to my strengths. So I'm gonna kick that up. Man, at this point I might start to think about removing some of these, because if it's 2.2, I may not want to run it. Generally speaking, like this one here, this one just is not doing well. I'm gonna get rid of it because I can't go lower than 1, and I don't want to keep it in the playbook. But so really what I'm trying to tell you is this, is if you take over a new team, you're not going to have any of this information. You won't really have a good idea of this information until week 3. After week 3, what you're really looking at is what is working, what is not. Add these plays based on which ones are working the best. And then don't add the ones that aren't. And then once you have a playbook, you actually can, and I'm going to have to go back in and fix some of this. You can then start to say, okay, this is never really working for me. I want to reduce it. This conversely is working for me, so I want to increase it, and I'm going to keep increasing it. And then that should allow you to play well against your opponent. Now again, the key is matchups. So I didn't really talk about depth chart, and I'm going to just make some assumptions, right? So left tackle goes against right end, right tackle goes against left end. If the left end sucks, but the right end is really good, you probably want to put your best tackle on the left side. I'm sorry, on the right side because the left end is really good, the right end is not, so you can actually do that. Now, if the right end is not very good, you can also leave your best tackle on that side, right? And then just run off that side constantly. Because again, you're trying to create the matchups that work best. And again, if you notice, Feliciano is wide receiver 2. If I notice that his nickel back is not very good or his dime back is not very good, I'm going to move Feliciano to wide receiver 3. Again, I could move him to tight end too if I want to, but what I may do is move Warrow, who's faster, to tight end 1 instead of tight end 2. Washington State runs a lot of 2 tight end sets, so it means I'm getting one of the linebackers most of the time, which is why he is where he is because that gives me the best setup. So again, try to create matchup problems. So generally, if you notice that a tackle on the offensive side is not so good, so let's just hypothetically say it's the right tackle is not so good, take your best end and put them on that left end side. So you're trying to create a matchup where your best player is against the worst player. Because then he should be able to get in and stop them. Now, if you do the analysis and you notice that they're always running off the right side and your best player is a good run stopper, then you're going to want to line that end on the right side to try to stop it. Same with your defensive tackle, probably your right outside linebacker too. Because you're trying to overload that side and you're trying to focus on stopping what they're really good at. Conversely, if they don't have that, then what you want to do is you want to create a matchup where you're putting your best players on the weakest side and then attacking it. But pay attention to what they're doing because a lot of people who run counter rights, off tackle rights, sweep rights, pitch rights, they're overloading a side and putting their best players on that side, which means that you want to be able to attack that side as well. So if everything on our side is pointing to the right, then you want all your good stuff on the left, because that's how it matches up. So hopefully this is helpful. There's a lot to this. I could probably spend hours and days on this, but if I had to break it down, is create positive matchups. A positive matchup is either you're putting your best players against their best players to shut them down, or you're putting your best players against their worst players to shut them down. And again, pay attention to what they're doing. So if they are running right a lot and you notice all the best players on the right, you probably want to put your best players on defense on the left. And if you notice all the best defensive players on the left, then you want to really kind of move all your stuff to the right. Or to the opposite side of what they're doing good at. So if all the best defensive players on the left, you probably want to go to the left most of the time, because your left is our right. Cornerbacks, wide receivers, find the cornerback that's not as good, put your best wide receiver against them. And then change your playbook to focus on throwing to that particular position. If you notice that they are slow and you have speed at wide receiver, start thinking about throwing the ball long. Think about play actions, think about things like that. If you notice that they have great ends against the run, but their tackles are suspect, and you have great guards and centers, but you may not have great tackles, run the ball inside. These things will kind of help you win. Again, it's all RNG at the end of the day. The computer is going to define who wins and who loses, but these are things that will actually help put you in a position of success to win. So, again, create the right matchups, play within the system, play within the players you have. Change your playbook from week to week, even if it's minutely changing the percentages or changing the run pass. Play to your opponent, don't just play. And then at the end of the day, have fun. If it's really not working for you, talk to some of the people in the league, see what they do well. If you're an SNCFL, talk to me. I'll give you one of my playbooks, probably give you some pointers here or there, especially if I have time, and just say, look, I'm looking at your roster and you're throwing the ball long and you shouldn't be doing that because you just don't have the personnel for it. Maybe think about changing up to a quick, uh, short passing game, up tempo because you have better endurance than your opponent does, and so forth. And that's the other thing that a lot of people forget is one of the things that does matter in this game a lot is uh, endurance. If you have good endurance, use it. And what that really means is go up tempo. So go fast, very fast on that strategy screen. If you don't have good endurance, don't go up tempo because your players are going to get tired, and as they get tired, they're not going to play as well. So, like, if you have people in the 60s, probably not a good idea to go very fast. People in the 80s, eh. People in the 90s, yes. 80s would, the way I equate it is if you have people in the 90s or the high 80s, go very fast or fast. If you have people in the 80s, go fast. If you have people in the 70s, kind of keep it a normal. And then if you have people below 70, think about slow, very slow. The other thing is if the other person has a fast attack, you might want to think about slowing down your offense. Um, Unless you think you can hold your own against them. When I played Michigan with UTSA earlier in the season and I beat them, um, I went very fast, high tempo. Because what I noticed is Michigan had some players who didn't have good endurance. I did. And of course I beat them, but the very next week, or 2 weeks later, I lost the game I probably should have won because I didn't change the playbook. So these are some of the things I would just say to look at if you're trying to become really good is understand what playbooks favor agility. If you have agility but no speed, understand what playbooks favor speed. Generally, outside rushing favors speed more than agility. Inside rushing favors agility and strength more than speed. Quick passing is more about agility and hands. Medium long passing is more about speed and hands. And then zone favors agility. Coverage favors speed in the defensive side of the ball. Coverage is typically about speed and intelligence versus, coverage and blitzing is about speed and intelligence, but if you're trying to stop the run, you probably want people who can tackle, who are intelligent and have good agility. So play to your strengths, not your opponents, wherever you can, but sometimes you don't have a choice, especially when you're a lightweight going against a heavyweight. You got to play to their strength and try to game plan on how to negate their strength to give you the best chance of winning. So that's it for now. Hopefully you find this useful. I had a plan going into this about what I wanted to talk about. I hit most of the points, but I may have rambled here or there. If this helps, let me know. Hit the like. If you want me to kind of go more in depth and build a playbook from scratch, I'm more than willing to. Or if you want me to look at your team and just say, here's 5 things I would do. Again, I'm open to giving you my playbooks. I don't have an issue because me giving a playbook isn't really going to help you one way or the other if you don't have the players for it or you don't have the right mentality for it. At the end of the day, just try to enjoy the game. Find out what is fun for you. So if you love option attacks, there are ways to make an option attack work. Start with making sure your quarterback has speed and hands over arm strength, and then make sure you have running backs who have good hands and really you have at least one running back who has strength and has agility for the up the middle, and then for the ones going on the outside when you're doing a pitch or you're doing an option to the outside, you want to make sure those running backs generally are the ones that have speed and hands. And then that should help you do. And then, of course, you want your linemen to have strength and you want them to have speed, especially if you're trying to pull off an option, along with good run blocking skills. And then if you're throwing the ball a lot, then you want to have good pass blocking skills. Again, you want to have speed, but you also want to have intelligence, and you really want to have semi-decent hands, and strength really doesn't matter in the passing game as much. Strength is really, when you think about offensive line, strength is really for running. So, OK may correct me on a lot of this. If he does, that's fine. But that's my opinion on things, and hopefully you find this to be helpful. So, thank you for the time tonight, and drop a like if you like this.